Hello, and in this lesson we are going to tackle lesson 4 in our 4th unit on vertebrates, and this is going to focus on the reptiles. That's right, our good friend, our spitting cobra, and the saltwater or estuarian crocodile. Let's go get started. We are now in class Reptilia. We started with animals, so kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordate, subphylum Vertebrata, and this is the class Reptilia. So just taxon and classification systems. Okay, this is the very first animal that we see of the vertebrates that can live all of their life on land, and they do this because they can reproduce on land. Up till now, all of the vertebrates that we have talked about are fish, and our amphibians have had to return to the water to reproduce. But with reptiles, we now can have reproduction on land. Some of the major things is that their skin is cool and dry. Even though you may think a snake's skin is somewhat slimy from the looks of it, it is actually cool and dry. They are still ectothermic, which means the outside temperature, whether that's air temperature or water temperature, will determine the internal body temperature, so the range. So if it gets hotter, the internal body temperature gets hotter. If it gets colder, the internal body temperature gets colder as well. Their skin is comprised of scales, so make sure you know that they have scales here. And we can further break down our reptiles into 4 orders, so kingdom, phylum, class, and order. All right. We'll talk a lot about squamatas here in a little bit, and we'll cover Testudines. Those are your turtles and tortoises. Then Crocodilia. Those are our alligators and our crocodiles. But for now, I want to touch briefly on our tuataras, the Sphenodontia. And Sphenodontia really had its heyday over 200 million years ago. That's right. Those are our dinosaurs. Okay. Some of the dinosaur species belonged in the order Sphenodontia. And the tuatara, which is this lizard-looking guy right here, which he looks like a lizard, but he's not. He's actually much, much closer to a dinosaur than the lizard is, because lizards are way more evolved than the Sphenodontians, or came along much, much later in the evolutionary cycle, I should say. So Sphenodontias, actually the tuataras, are the very last living representative of this entire order. So if these species die out, this entire order dies out as well. And these guys only live in New Zealand, so they are Kiwis, okay, because that is the what we call folks from New Zealand. And they are highly endangered due to their habitats being decimated by humans. So of this representative species, the tuatara, the last of the Sphenodontians, there's only about 70 to 80,000 individual organisms, animals, in New Zealand. And beyond just the history, this animal has been around for 200 million years, you would also lose a really, really cool attribute. If you look here, and it's highlighted here for us in this blown up spot, they actually have a third eye on top of their head. And it's very noticeable when they're juveniles, or roughly under 4 months old. Once they get into the adult stage, they kind of lose that. Now, these guys do not progress very, very quickly. They don't reach full adulthood until about 65 years old. So they have a very slow metabolism rate, which is one of the reasons why they're pretty endangered. But this third eye is awesome. It does have photoreceptors in it, but scientists aren't exactly sure yet of what the function is of this third eye. They're not sure if it's to see light and dark, or if it's to help with navigation, or if it's helped to spot predators for it. But I thought that was pretty cool, and I wanted to share that with you guys. Let's dive into some of the major advancements for all reptiles. So these are all things that you need to know for like tests and quizzes. They have a true land skin, so that is that scaly skin. It keeps the water in. It is not nearly as thin as an amphibian skin would be, so a true land skin. Also, their heart has now developed a septum. If you remember from our discussion on amphibians, frog hearts and amphibian hearts are 3-chambered, so 1, 2, and 3. So left atrium, right atrium, and ventricle. But the blood mixes here, so oxygenated and oxygen, deoxygenated blood mix inside of the ventricle, so you don't get a highly oxygenated blood to the body. This is helped out a little bit with this advent or growth of the septum, and that's what that little organ is called, or the little semi-wall, if you will, inside of the ventricle. So for the first time, we're starting to close this off. And once we close this off, that doesn't happen until birds, but now we have, once we get to birds and mammals, you'll see that we get a whole lot of oxygenated blood, which is very good for efficiency's sake. And we'll talk more about that in that particular lesson. But the big advancement you need to know for reptiles is that they have developed a septum inside of their ventricle. And the septum is a little semi-wall that helps to block the blood, the deoxygenated blue blood, mixing with the oxygenated red blood. Okay? And then finally, the amniotic egg. And I guarantee you're going to see a bunch of questions on that. In fact, the next couple of slides deal just with the amniotic egg. So this is the first group of vertebrates that have a way to protect their young. And they protect their young, their embryos developing inside of a leathery eggshell. Okay? So the very first amniotic egg is found in the reptiles. And what I want you to do here is on your question sheet and in your notes, there are several individual components of the amniotic egg. So we have the amnion, the albumin, the allantois, the chorion, the yolk sac, and the shell. You need to make sure you know how to label these. You need to make sure you understand what each component does. I guarantee you're going to see test questions and quiz questions. So I would recommend that you pause the video right now, take out your answer sheet, or your questions for this particular lesson, and fill this out, and then make your notes here and put a star by this that you need to know these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 structures of the eggshell, or of the egg. So go ahead and pause the video now. I certainly hope you took advantage of that and you did pause the video. If not, shame on you. You should go back and pause it and do what we ask you to do. That is how you do the best that you possibly can on our tests and on our quizzes. So amnion, real quick. It is a fluid-filled membrane that protects the embryo. So the amnion is right here. That is this white little membrane that goes around. Okay? So it's fluid-filled and it helps for protection of the embryo. The albumin, which is this part right, drew that too much, this part right in here. Okay, so right here, the albumin. That is what is also known as the egg white. It's mostly dissolved protein. It keeps the embryo moist and it helps to cushion the embryo as it moves around, or as the egg would move. The allantois collects waste and exchange gases. So that is this whole portion right here. So the allantois helps with exchanging gases, so oxygen and carbon dioxide, and helps to collect waste. Then we have the chorion. The chorion is a thin member, so that's this whole, or thin membrane, I should say, just under the shell, that also helps for gas exchange. Okay. The yolk sac, that is this part right here. We know the yolk, the yellow portion of our eggs, contains nutrients by the mother. Okay. So the mother provides nutrients inside of this yolk sac and will feed the embryo. And finally, we have the shell. It's made of calcium carbonate. It is water impermeable, but is gas permeable, which means it allows for O2, or oxygen, to go in, and it allows carbon dioxide to come out, so that gas exchange. All right, so you need to know those parts. They are egg-laying animals, and we call egg-laying animals oviparous because they give birth from an egg. All right, so they are animals that lay fertilized eggs, and that is known as oviparous. Now, some sharks, roughly 30% of sharks, are also oviparous. We also have some fish, bony fish, that are oviparous. Okay, so oviparity and internal fertilization does extend back millions of years, and we do see that in reptiles as well. Okay, so it requires internal fertilization because the embryo's got to get inside the egg somehow, and the egg develops around the embryo. All right, the egg develops around the embryo, and the embryo, not the other way around. It doesn't have an egg and then we somehow open up a door or something like that to put the embryo in. That doesn't happen. So the egg develops around the embryo, and that requires internal fertilization. As again we've talked about, the shell allows for gas exchange but not fluid, so air can get in, Carbon dioxide can get out, but the water stays. And the parent must assist with temperature regulation. That's where you will not see a reptile in most instances lay on the nest, but you will see them cover the nest with either sand or twigs or dirt or soil, combination of the two. So they do help with regulating temperature. And temperature, especially in our crocodilians, are very important for the sex of which individual animal. So if the body is, or if the eggs reach a certain temperature, they become males. If they're under that certain temperature, they become females. So temperature does play a big part in an embryo's development. Now we're going to get into specifically the order Squamata, and Squamata has our snakes and lizards. Okay, so Squamata is snakes and lizards. Here's a cobra. There are approximately 2,900 species. 375 of them are venomous. They have the largest, which is the reticulated python, which is this guy here, has been known to get up to 30 feet. Now, 30 feet is a monumental length for anything, really, and even a reticulated python. There are not many of these. That is the largest that has been on record, and in some cases, these records can be skewed. For example, the largest saltwater crocodile, supposedly on record, is 33 feet, but in reality, it's actually closer to 23 feet. So take this with a grain of salt. The smallest one would be the Barbados thread snake. That's this guy. He only weighs in at about 4 inches. Now, still in order Squamata, so are snakes and lizards. Snakes have teeth. Okay, so you can see the teeth under here in the unhinged lower jaw. The lower jaw is not fused here. They are separated, and they are separated for a very important purpose. These guys eat their prey whole. They are carnivorous. Okay, they eat meat. They like things like rodents and frogs and birds and all kinds of stuff. And because they don't chew their food, they use these individual or unconnected mandibles here to work, kind of ooch it. So like this one will move up and this one will move down, and then this one moves up and this one moves down. And basically it'll walk the animal in. And I'll show this demonstration in class. Just remind me to do so. There are 2 main types of snakes. There are constrictors. Those are the larger snakes like your anacondas and your pythons that wrap around their prey, squeeze it tight to constrict the airflow to suffocate their prey. Then you have venomous snakes. Things like eastern diamondback rattler snakes, which would be a viper. And a viper is designated by an arrowhead shape. Okay, so an arrowhead shape followed by the body coming off. And I know I'm a terrible artist, but that is what dictates whether you're a viper or not. Now, not all venomous snakes are vipers. You can have, like the coral snake, for instance, their mouth, that's the mouth of it, okay? Their fangs are actually in the rear of it, and so they're called rear-fanged venomous snakes. Now, typically, those fangs contain much more potent venom than a front fang one, because in this system, in this rattlesnake, or I believe this is a rattlesnake, you can see that it's kind of hollow here, so the venom will go in through the hollow tubes. And you can see how it comes out here. That's the exit hole. So we have the fang that punctures, then you have the delivery system of the venom itself, and then whatever kind of toxin it has, whether it's neuro or cardiovascular, will go to work. Okay, so that is snakes. And now we move into a little bit more on snakes. We have the flicking of their tongue, so that's a picture represented here. They flick their tongue to smell the air. These nostrils, or these nares, do not detect smell. These nostrils are actually their heat-sensing organs, so they can see body heat through those pits. They actually smell, or their version of smell is based off of their tongue. Okay, they are ectothermic, so they'll hibernate, and they must shed their skin. So you can see a snake skin here. They shed it 3 to 6 times per year. Snakes have been recorded to live as much as 50 years. Moving still in order Squamata, but another group called the lizards. They are long-bodied. They have 2 pairs of legs and a tapered tail. Now, there are exceptions to this. There is a legless lizard, but it is a lizard, not a snake. Okay? Their tongue varies depending on what it does. Their skin still has scales, just like all reptiles do, and it can be modified for a specific use. Coloration would be an example of that. There are 3,800 species currently known, and the gecko is the most common. Now moving different orders into the Testudines, our turtles and our tortoises. So what's the big difference? Well, a turtle is water-dwelling. They're not all sea turtles. Some of the terrapins, or little turtles, are here, and they are all water-dwelling, and they have webbed feet. Now in a sea turtle, the whole thing has been adapted into a flipper, but you can see in this diamond, which you can't really see the coloration on the back, but anyway, this is a diamond terrapin, and you can see that there's webbing in between these toes here, okay? On your tortoises, they are land animals, okay? Land-dwelling. Turtles are water-dwelling. They have webbed feet. Tortoises do not have webbed feet. They have little individual toes, okay? Also, tortoises eat plants and vegetation, whereas turtles are carnivorous. For instance, the sea turtle eats primarily jellyfish, and then terrapins, small turtles, will typically eat small fish. Okay? Under the hood, looking at the shell, that is actually a part of the skeleton. It is permanently attached to the ribs and backbone. In some child cartoons, you'll see a turtle jump out of its shell. It cannot do that. It is permanently attached to the rib and to the backbone. Okay? The shell itself is made of bone, and those bones are covered in keratin, very similar to our fingernails. Okay? It's made up of a few major components: the carapace on top, the plastron on the bottom. Each individual scale, if you will, or section of the shell is called a scute. Okay? And finally, we move into our crocodilians. Love crocodiles and alligators and caimans. Now, caimans are small. They're darker coloration, and they have a little bit different snout. Their snouts are typically much shorter. So you could see like a crocodile going like that. A caiman would be much shorter. All right? So there is caimans. You also have freshwater crocodiles, or freshies in Australia, as you call it. And again, their jawline is much, much different. They have 24 powerful teeth per jaw, and they are meant to crush. So when a crocodile or an alligator chomps down on something, crocodiles will go with large preys. Crocodiles do see humans as a prey source. They also see deer and birds and sharks and fish, all kinds of stuff, as prey items, because they grow much larger. Well, in some instances, not much larger. The average size of a salty would be around 20 to 23 feet. Your average size of your American alligator would be roughly around 14 feet. Okay, can they get bigger? Yes, but that's the average size. Fun fact, 99% of all crocodilians are eaten in their first year. So one of the key components of this apex predator is to feed the rest of the ecosystem as most of them develop. Crocodiles do cry, so crocodile tears is a real thing while they eat. Okay, they are still ectothermic because, well, they are reptiles. They regulate their temperature by opening up their mouths on a bank. The alligators, how to tell them apart: your alligators have a rounded snout, and your crocodiles have more of a pointed snout. Okay, so that is a big difference there. Crocodiles, if you shine a light on them in the dark, will show red. Ooh. And finally, I believe this is our last slide. Let me double check. We're going to compare and contrast the amphibian brain with the reptilian brain. Over here, we have our amphibian brain, and this is our reptilian brain. The big difference, and the thing I want you to pay the closest attention to, is the size of the cerebral hemisphere. In an amphibian, it's this portion here, and equals roughly 30% of the brain's size. In a reptile, we get the forebrain and the midbrain, so roughly 50% of the brain size is going to be the thinking portion of the brain. So even though we're broken up in reptiles between a forebrain and a midbrain, the thinking center has actually grown in volume. So that's a good thing. We still have our smelling area, we still have our balance, and we still have our vital functions. All right? So that is the compare and contrast of the amphibian versus reptile brain. Hope you enjoyed it. Your video secret number is going to be 21. 21 is your video secret number. I will see you all in class.